Hey guys, Sneaky Snake here, Brothers in Arms, World of Warships, and today's video we're going to take a look at our next community replay, and this one features Philostrat playing in the Z-23, the Tier 8 German DD. He's playing by himself, and it's some domination here on the map Haven. So if you'd like to send a replay into us, please send it to BIAworldofwarships, all lowercase, at gmail.com. Please include the replay file, post-game screenshots if you have them, a brief description of the battle, and then if you'd like myself or Spider to do the commentary, you can request for that in your submission. So before we get into the replay, I'd like to say to you, Bernhard, ich muss sagen, dass dein Englisch ziemlich gut ist. Ich hoffe, Sie können dasselbe über mein Deutsch sagen. Anyway, so the Z-23 here in World of Warships. What do you need to know about it? Well, the first couple minutes of the replay here are going to be a little bit boring, to be frank with you. So I just want to go over what makes the Z-23 a pretty good destroyer here at Tier 8. So first things first, I'd like to mention that Bernhard does not have a fully upgraded Z-23. The reason why I know this is because he has 8.5 kilometers on his torpedo range. And if you take a look at the modules on the Z-23, the G7 Steinbosch torpedoes are the ones that have 8.5 kilometers, and those are the stock ones. So these torpedoes for Tier 8 are okay. You do have a pretty long reload at 90 seconds on them, and they don't do a lot of damage, and they're not terribly fast. They're kind of mediocre torpedoes for their tier, but you know, it's not terrible. It's not like that they're really bad. You know, 65 knots of speed is still pretty all right. 14,400 damage is definitely on the low end, but it's not too bad, and you get 8 fish, so it's a decent broadside to be throwing downrange. The big sell with the Z-23, however, is the choice between the guns. You get a choice between 128 millimeters and most commonly what everybody goes with, the 150 millimeters if you do decide to upgrade the guns. And these guns are honestly pretty good on a numbers basis. 6.7 second reload is on the slow side, of course, but they are 150s after all, so that is to be expected. You have a firing range of 10.84 kilometers, which you can see that he has. I doubt that he has advanced firing training on this guy, so he's not able to shoot out much further. 2,200 high explosive shell damage with a 12% fire chance, which is a very nice alpha strike for a destroyer gun, and then 3,700 damage with the armor-piercing shot. And not only that, but the AP is able to citadel equal and low-tier cruisers somewhat consistently at ranges of under 6 kilometers. So obviously you're pretty close to the cruisers at that point, but these 150mm AP rounds are no joke, and even on broadside battleships, it is highly recommended that if you do get a fire with the high explosive and they are sailing broadside, switch over to the AP and let the AP go. Now you can see that Bernhard got into the cap, the C cap, and got it assisted with the help of his friend in the Cossack. And the Z-23 is one of the better cap contesters at the high tiers, and the reason is pretty simple. It has access to hydroacoustic search. Now you can see that he only has 3 charges of each consumable, so that tells me he does not have superintendent as well. But the thing about the Z-23 is the hydroacoustic makes it a pretty good cap contester. You have about a 3 kilometer detect on enemy torpedoes, and you have a 4.4 kilometer detection on enemy ships. So you can be somewhat aggressive with this ship. Now, of course, the tier 9 and 10, they have a lot more range on their hydroacoustic to detect stuff, but 4.4 kilometers is okay. If you're in a safe situation and you know that the enemy team is kind of away from you or they're not focused on your cap, you can proactively charge down enemy DDs. A lot of the time you do have to use island cover to be able to get within hydroacoustic range, but if you do so, it's pretty dangerous, and a hydroacoustic DD player that knows how to take advantage of it is a very dangerous player, and one that, you know, should garner a lot of respect in and around the caps. You know, ships like the Fletcher, which is objectively a much powerful destroyer than the Z-23, can be countered somewhat easily if you manage to use island cover or manage to sneak up on them, get within hydroacoustic range, smoke up, and let your guns do all the talking. So you kind of get that playstyle that the the Z-46 and the Z-52 further expound upon a little bit here with this German DD. However, the AA kind of sucks. The concealment isn't the best. 6.2 kilometers is okay for Tier 8, but there are plenty of ships at this tier The Kagero and the Benson come to mind immediately that have better concealment, and I'm fairly certain that the Lightning, the British destroyer, does as well. So you're not going to be really winning the concealment battles, but 6.2 is still competitive enough that for the most part, when you run into higher tier DDs, with the exception of the Japanese, you're only going to be a few hundred meters that you have to close the distance to be able to spot them. So this Mahan gets spotted at 7+ kilometers, which tells me he doesn't have concealment, and that's exactly what the case is. The Mahan just barely comes into Bernhard's detection range, so he decides to do a very interesting decision and drop 2 widespread sets of torpedoes. Now, really quickly, if you guys were wondering why that camera angle that you saw on screen is a little bit different, I think there's a mod on Aslan's, but I also think there's one on the official Wargaming World of Warships mod pack where it kind of gives you a more zoomed in camera view. It's kind of like the one that's in World of Tanks. So that's the camera here that Bernhard is using. Now you can see that he knocks the engine out on the Mahan, and the Mahan is not running last stand, which is a absolutely horrible decision, and one of his torpedoes manages to get some good RNG and slams home right into the center part of that Tier 7 American DD. He picks up devastating strike, and he picks up his first kill of the game. However, you can see that the enemy team is getting ready to make a pretty hard push here into the sea cap. His friendly Cossack is on the run, moving to the southeast, and this enemy team is going to be able to get onto this capture point pretty quickly here. So Bernhard is going to circle back around. He still has 30 seconds left on his torpedo reload. He's going to try to get into a position to try and torpedo the enemy ships that go and get on the sea cap. So he's playing very cautiously, and that's something that is to be commendable. You know, you see a lot of uber aggression from destroyers very early on in games, and much like light tanks and World of Tanks, they go forward and die in the first couple minutes, and it's just frustrating because destroyers, you know, in random battles, when there's not a carrier in the game, destroyers really do hold all the carry potential for your team. You can have as many good cruiser and battleship players as you can, but if the enemy team has good enough destroyer players and they don't die early and they get on the caps, it makes coming back so much more difficult. So Bernhard here is just playing it nice and cautiously, and you know, some of you watching might say that he plays it a little bit too cautiously over the course of the game, but when you see the result that he has, I think that it was warranted. And you know, this very cautious, very careful play style, you know, this is good. You know, you're not going to see an extremely large amount of damage with this game, but what you're going to see is solid, slow, and steady play. And I think a lot of the newer players out there that you know, obviously haven't had a really big performance or maybe are struggling with their destroyer play, this is a perfect replay to be able to pick some things up. So now he moves into position, and he's dropping his torpedoes downrange at the enemy shores, that Tier 7 Soviet light cruiser, and you can see that the 65 knot speed is good enough. Those torpedoes are going to get there relatively quickly. That shores is still in the middle of the sea cap undetected because there's nobody close enough to have line of sight, but it looks like Bernhard's torpedoes are going to be good, and even if the shores turned in, it has such a large turning circle that it makes it very difficult to dodge torpedoes, and he manages to get 2 slamming home on that Soviet cruiser as he picks up his second kill of the game, and he's up to about 30,000 damage. So honestly, if he died right now, and that's the result that he had, 2 frags, a dev strike, 30k damage, and assisted cap, that would still put him near the top of the team. And that's the thing about destroyers. You don't really need to do that much damage to have good results. As long as you get a cap or 2, as long as you're able to deal some damage to, you know, various enemy destroyers, and you know, maybe get some base defense ribbons and stuff like that, you're going to have a pretty solid result. But now, with the shores taken care of, Bernhard is going to feint like he's going to be moving back onto the sea cap, but then he decides against it, and he's actually going to turn away here. Now you can see that there's a Prince Potato moving to the southwest, there's a Tirpitz moving to the south-southeast, there is an enemy ship on the sea cap, of course, and unfortunately for Bernhard and his team, the sea cap is going to get flipped right here, but there's still 2 enemy destroyers out there. One of them is the Z-26, and the other is the Asashio. So you can see that the Z-46 is spotted, so that we can absolutely deduce that the Asashio was on that sea cap. And an Asashio has a much better stealth rating than the Z-23 does, so him trying to charge that guy down and get him detected is going to take 2 things. It's going to take him moving in at the right time, and B, it's going to take the Asashio not positioning himself too good in the cap, maybe bow on to Bernhard, where he'd have to turn away, and by turning away, obviously, you're going to be closing the distance really, really quickly. But Bernhard decides that now the time is right to go in and try to make a play. So he's going to move in here. He's going to turn a little bit to starboard and go charging into the sea cap. You can see that the enemy turrets out in front it appears coming to a stop, and now Bernhard does get detected. So he knows that the Asashio is here, and as I spoke about, the Asashio was somewhat bow on to him, so when he had to turn hard to the left, to his left, he was going to drift closer and closer. And now that Bernhard has closed the distance, you can see the armor piercing, the high explosive shot going downrange, getting a lot of damage. 2 salvos of about 2,000 plus damage. However, the next one is going to be for the lulz, and the one shell that hits manages to get the devastating strike on that Tier 8 premium Japanese destroyer. So quite a bit of good RNG right there for Bernhard, but hey, fortune favors the bold. And when you do get hooked up by RNG, you really need to make the enemy team pay for it. So, a nice detonation right there, pretty cheeky, but he picks up his second dev strike of the game, and now you can see that he's getting ready to launch these torpedoes at the enemy turrets. You can see that the turrets is starting to move in reverse, because the white indicator is moving in reverse, of course. So Bernhard is now dropping his first set of torpedoes downrange at that guy. And he's actually using the Asashio's smokescreen to his advantage, because that Asashio smokescreen is getting rid of the line of sight between him and that battleship, even though he is too close to the turrets to avoid hard detection. But now he is capturing the point. He's got about 30 seconds left on it, and his first set of torpedoes are going downrange. Hopefully, they'll be able to get there in time. The turrets does realize it at the last second, but unfortunately, it's just a little bit too late for him, and 2 torpedoes are going to slam home on that German behemoth, and he picks up 4 goal haul, now since removed from the game, and his 4th frag so far of this contest, and now he has about 10 seconds left until he manages to get the sea cap for the second time in this game. His team now has a very comfortable lead at 767 to 545. They have a, one ship advantage here, and they have a 3-to-1 cap advantage as well. So this is a game that is definitely in their favor. And right as the smoke screen runs out, the Z-46 charging onto the sea cap actually comes within surface detection range of Bernhard. However, Bernhard is in a much better position because he's in the kiting position. So that Z-23, to use all of his guns, has to open up quite a bit of broadside to Bernhard, whereas Bernhard has a lot more room to maneuver, and he can also still use all of his guns shooting over the shoulder. And he manages to kill and pick up the Kraken on that Tier 9 German destroyer. An excellent bit of micro positioning right there, where it just so happened that when the Z-46 came in the cap, he was in the exact spot that he needed to be to make that engagement work, because the Z-46 has much better DPM, and that's the last thing that you'd want to do in a Z-23 is get into a close quarters knife fight with any destroyer that has better DPM. So he positioned himself in a kiting manner, and it ended up working out perfectly for him. So Bernhard, that was a very good play right there. I don't know if that was your intention. It sure seemed like it on my end, but that was a very good play that helped kill off that Tier 9 German DD. And now with 5 frags in the game and 60,000 damage, this is turned into a very nice result. So now Bernhard, with the armor piercing loaded, is going to move in, maybe get a cheeky kill here. His team now has over 900 points, so it's all over but the crying. There's the Nagato, the Prince Potato, the Lion, and the Indianapolis. It appears Bernhard is going to try to get some armor piercing usage here before the end of the game. The Indianapolis gets hit down to 631 hit points, but I think he's going to be able to dodge those shells and get behind the island. Now, Bernhard here, looking for some torpedoes potentially. He's just trying to see how fast he's moving. However, he's going to make another good play right here, and he's going to chill and put himself where whenever that enemy Indianapolis comes through the gap here in the island, he's actually going to be able to get line of sight on him and hopefully secure that kill. He gets some armor-piercing shot downrange in the Nagato. A little bit of a bad shot right there as all the shells went high, but now the Indianapolis appears, and hopefully he'll be able to slide some shells over the top of the island, and that's exactly what he's able to do. He does eat a pretty big salvo from him, but then he kills off the ship, and that ends the game. Alrighty guys, taking a look now at the persönliche Wertung. He managed to have 315,000 credits received and 4.8k total experience earned. He picked up 2 devastating strikes, the since removed 4-goal haul, and the Kraken Unleashed, dealing 62,500 points of damage off of 33 shell hits and 5 torpedo hits. He sank half of the enemy team, 3 fires, 5 floods, 2 base defense ribbons, 1 solo base cap, 1 assisted base cap, and 6 ships spotted. Taking a look at the team Wertung, he managed to finish first on the team with 2,422 base experience. That is a very good performance in any ship with that kind of base XP. And now taking a look at the Ausführliche Bericht, and he managed to deal 62,000 points of damage as mentioned. 26 of it was with the guns, 35,000 was dealt with the torpedoes, and 188 was dealt with some fire damage as well. 336,000 potential, not very much for a destroyer, but you know, the real number that we need to look at is the Eroberungspunkte. Yeah, Eroberungspunkte. 101 out of 239 capture points he was able to secure for his team, which was very nice. So very good stuff, Bernhard. Thank you for sending in the replay. As I mentioned, I know that this is not the highest damaging game. I know that this is not the best Z-23 game that you've ever seen. But this replay right here, guys, a very good example of somebody making smart plays, being passive-aggressive, having aggression when needed, but for the most part playing with the passivity that is required to stay alive in your DDs and have a good result over the course of a game. And it was very impressive to watch. So Bernhard, thank you for sending this in. I hope I didn't butcher the German too much. If you're still watching, I'm going to be taking German language next year as my minor for my history degree because I'd like to speak German someday, and I've already gotten a little bit of a head start on it, just trying to pronounce things correctly, so I hope I did not butcher it too bad, but thanks again for sending in the replay, and guys, thanks for tuning in. This is the Sneaky Snake for BIA World of Warships signing off. Please consider liking the video, sharing it with your buddies, commenting on it. We love to chit-chat with you guys in the comment section, and have a fantastic day.